I'm Captain Mike, and this is Whiskey and Witerature. I do whiskey and book reviews, and today it is the 50 greatest books of all time 2025 edition. Strap in, get something nice to drink. It's going to be a longish video. We're going to talk about 50 plus books. I am going to do chapter tools, so if you want to skip to the book list, I'll probably do in 10 book increments. Feel free to skip ahead. But if you complain at the end of this video in the comments that my list sucks, or why isn't your favorite book on the list, I will know you skipped this first part about the list and just went directly to the list. Second, if you're wondering why I'm filming this video in an abandoned house, this is my house. Hurricane Helene dropped 3 feet of water inside of here, so we've had to gut the house. We're going to tear it down and build a new house. We're just working our way through FEMA and all the insurance and mortgage processes right now. So it's just a concrete slab, block walls, and studs. And I know there's a bit of an echo in the house. To apologize for the audio quality, it is what it is. And also in my 2023 and 2024 iterations of the 50 greatest books of all time videos, I had a hard copy of all the books. I don't have those for this year because Hurricane Helene got a lot of my books wet. So we're just going to have a hard copy of the books that I'm going to read this coming year, the new books that are on the list. If you said, Mike, how can this list be the greatest books of all time? I would say, you know what, I do not have the balls to say that any list that I could create is the greatest books of all time list. I could make a list of my greatest books, but those wouldn't be the greatest books. So who has the balls? Shane. Shane has them. He didn't actually create the list. He created the algorithm that creates the list. An algorithm is a set of rules. You input data and it outputs a solution. In this case, Shane's algorithm, he puts into it greatest books list from different sources, and out comes a list of the greatest books of all time. And it is thousands of books long. We're only going to talk about the top 50. I first came across this list in 2022, and I thought, certainly I've read a lot of books on this list because I like to read, and I'd only read 3 or 4 of the books. So that's how this YouTube channel came to be. In 2023, I read and reviewed 52 books in 52 weeks, including the 50 greatest books of all time. At the end of 2023, I was looking at my reading schedule for 2024, and I looked at the list, and I realized that the list of greatest books of all time, it had changed. And it makes sense that it's actually a living list. And it also changes because the number of lists that Shane inputs into the algorithm has changed. In 2022, he only used about 130 lists. Currently, he's up to like 450 lists that he puts into the algorithm to generate the list of the greatest books of all time. I don't know Shane. He's not my buddy. We've communicated via email a few times, and he seems like a really nice guy. I will link his website in the description below. Feel free to go give him some love. He's doing the Lord's work. So the way that I'm using the list now, because I've already read the 50 greatest books of all time from the 2023 edition, and Shane updates the list like on a monthly basis now, but I just go back in December or January, and I consider that to be the list for the next year. 10 to 20% of the books change as he updates his algorithm, as he updates the list into the algorithm. The list itself changes. So some books do fall off and some books come onto the list, and the books shuffle within the list. So having read through them all, that was a very aggressive, which I don't really recommend to many, if anybody, that kind of a reading schedule. But now I only have to read 6 to maybe 10 books that are new to the list each year, and then I fill in around that the other books that I want to read. So even if it takes you a few years to go through this entire list, or you just want to pick and choose, I think that's a good way to go. And then you can just keep up with the changes as time goes through. And I think it's a great reading schedule. I received 2 complaints in my previous videos about the list. The first one is that the list is very academic. And of course it is. a lot of the lists that Shane gets that he inputs into the algorithm, they are from higher learning institutions. They're from governmental institutions. They're from stodgy book club book list. They're not Billy Bubba's best looks books that are kind of exciting. These are just, classic books for the most part. List. So, and you can go onto Shane's website and you can look at the list that he inputs into the algorithm. It is a fairly academic list. Any book list that you make would be more exciting, or me, would be a more exciting list than this list. But I do think it's an exciting list. It's a great list of books. The second complaint that I got the most on my previous videos is the fact that the Count of Monte Cristo is not on the list. This is a book that I have not read. And so due to all the comments, and I read all the comments on my YouTube channel, due to the comments, I did buy this book last year and I started reading it in September. Late September, Hurricane Helene came through. It has crushed my life since September. It's been a disaster. I got about halfway through and I have not opened the book since. That's how far I got. I'm going to start this again in 2025. I'm just going to start on page 1. I was loving it. I'm sad that I didn't finish it. I'm just going to start reading it again this year and get all the way through it this time. I think it's number 92 on the list as of December, last time that I checked. Let's name the 6 books that were bumped off of the list and then get to it. So we have Gulliver's Travels, David Copperfield, Stories of Anton Chekhov, Leaves of Grass, Candide, and For Whom the Bell Tolls. I am sad that all those books are off of the top 50, except Candide. I don't know why that book was on the list to begin with. All right, guys, let's get to the books. At this time, we're going to start with number 50 and work our way through number 1. Number 50, Collected Fictions by Jorge Luis Borges. Now, I lived in Argentina for 2 years, and I was super excited for Borges' book, and it completely let me down. I was so disappointed. I'm not really into these metaphysical explorations. It wasn't what I expected. I thought it would be more grit, more gaucho. You let me down, Borges. Number 49, and if I say any of these authors' names wrong, I'm sorry. Number 49, The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. I don't know anything about this book. It is new to the list, so I am going to read and review it with Mrs. Captain this year in 2025. What are your thoughts about this one? Number 48, Beloved by Toni Morrison. As a 52-year-old white male born in Charleston, South Carolina, I could go into a bookstore or a library 1,000 times and I wouldn't have picked up Beloved by Toni Morrison. And that's a shame. I didn't really enjoy it, but you don't enjoy reading a book like Beloved, but I appreciated it. I wept while I read this book. And it is a book that deserves to be read, and I think you should read Beloved by Toni Morrison. Number 47, Absalom by William Faulkner. And this review is kind of going to go for both of the Faulkners that are on this list. I thought I was going to like Faulkner. I hear guys are just like goo goo gaga for him. And the way he employs the stream of consciousness narrative style, I am just not down for Faulkner. I think his underlying stories are amazing, and I wanted to like them so bad. I just feel like I had to wade through so much muckety muck to get to the story. It wasn't really worth it to me for the payoff. Having said that, I've committed to turn back to Faulkner and try and give him another chance. But I just don't have it in me for 2025. Maybe next year. Number 46, 1001 Arabian Nights by Unknown. Man, I thoroughly enjoyed the version that I read in 2023. However, it was a bowdlerized version of the stories. In other words, it was like a kid's version. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Again, I read all the comments in my channel, and some of the guys and girls said you should give Penguin Classics their tales. And it's several volumes long. I bought this last year. I didn't get to it in 2024, but I'm committed to reading Volume 1, 1001 Arabian Nights, the Penguin Classics version. I am really excited for this more adult version of the tales. Number 45, The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway. This was my first Hemingway that I read in 2023. Now, last year I read For Whom the Bell Tolls. I am more of a Sun Also Rises kind of guy compared to For Whom the Bell Tolls, but I enjoyed both of those. Again, I did weep, and really, man, that book was amazing. I like his sparse prose, his lack of adjectives and descriptors. It's just like, man, here's the story. Enjoy it. I liked Hemingway, and I've told myself I'm going to read this book again, I think this year in 2025, unless you can convince me in the comment section that I should read a different Hemingway than The Sun Also Rises. Let me know. Number 44, new to the list this year, On the Road by Jack Kerouac. I don't know anything about this book other than I'm excited to read it because I do judge books by their cover, and this one's got certainly the coolest cover of any of the books on the list. Number 43, Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. This was new to the list last year, and I was supposed to read it, and I bought it, and I didn't get to it. So I am going to read and review it this year. I have started it, and so far so good. The full review coming up. Number 42, Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie. In 2023, this was number 50 on the list. So I was staring down the barrel of reading 52 books, and this was the first one that I picked up. And I was like, WTF have I gotten myself into? This style of narrative, and plus just I had to keep looking up things that I think he expected us to know about the culture there. I was lost a large portion of this book, didn't really appreciate the style and the prose of Midnight's Children. Number 41, The Red and the Black by Stendhal. I read it, I tried to enjoy it, and I failed. Number 40, Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, new on the list for 2025. I think this was one of my mom's favorite books when I was growing up because there was a copy of it on the shelf, and she had that cool Les Mis t-shirt. I told her that I ordered this book and I'm going to read it this year, and this is a different translation than the one that we had on the shelf when I was growing up. I let her know that I'm going to read that this year, and she's excited for me. She said she read it a couple of times and she thought it was a great book. This will be the highest number of pages of any book I ever read. I think it's got over 1,300 pages in the text. So Les Mis by Victor Hugo. Number 39, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I read 52 books in 2023. This was not in the top 50, but Frankenstein was one of the books I read. It was assigned to me by my wife, Mrs. Captain. I'm so glad she did. I can't believe I hadn't read this. I thought it was a great read. I think that you can tell it was written by a woman, and I think that in the best way possible. I think if you compare Frankenstein to a monster horror novel written by a male or a man, I think it's very clear the style differences between the two books, and I think it was a fantastic read. Okay, number 38, The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. I don't know anything about this book. It's new on the list. I've read the description in the back, and it just sounds like it's a crazy, crazy ride. I ordered this same copy for my daughter Sadie, and we are going to read and review together in 2025. Number 37, The Iliad by Homer. Again, I read this in 23. I had never read anything like this in my life. I'm glad I read the Aeneid prior. I think it was a good primer for reading Homer. And I think perhaps a chart of the gods would be helpful while you're reading a Homer epic poem. But regardless if you have one or not, I think it was great. 36, Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. I really struggled with this work. The flow and the pacing, I felt like were so awkward. I was confused half the time about what was even going on. Honestly, I don't get this book and why it's on the list. Number 35, Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. And I was not sure how I was going to feel about Virginia Woolf's books. I mean, I had some preconception basically due to the cover of all these classic works I didn't know anything about before I started reading them in 2023. She also employs a stream of consciousness style narrative, but I think it worked. It worked for her. I enjoyed the pacing and the flow and the kind of parallel stories that are interwoven. It is a tragic story, and even more so considering how Miss Wolfe took her own life. Number 34, Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. I tried to read this earlier in my life, but I was a Mormon, and active Mormons do not have a sense of humor, and the naughty bits made me blush. But since leaving Mormonism, the scales have been lifted from my eyes, and I could appreciate the humor and the flowy prose, the crazy nature of this work. I think it is a masterfully woven comedy, and there are not many comedies in this book list, and I think it is great, and I'm glad to have it on my shelf. Number 33, Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. If I had to choose, I'm more of a David Copperfield guy than a Great Expectations guy. Man, I just adored David Copperfield. But I will admit and recognize that Great Expectations is a better work. It has more depth, a more complex story. It has a better bad guy. Man, Great Expectations is a great work, and we should all read that one. Number 32, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. I cannot believe I lived my life without reading this story. What a classic work of some of these greatest characters. A story of friendship and freedom. What a worthy read. Number 31, The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann. This is one of the first books that I read in 2023. I didn't really have nice things to say about it in my review. I would like to return to this book and give it another go. I feel like maybe having read so many classics since then, it has shifted my perception on how I look at these works. What are your thoughts on Thomas Mann's work? Number 30, The Trial by Franz Kafka. I wasn't sure what to make of this book. Honestly, I don't get it. And it's short enough that it's tempting to pick it up and give it a go. But I just don't understand the appeal of this work. I thought I was going to try and read some more Kafka, but I just can't bring myself to do it. Number 29, The Bible by Jesus. I think the Bible is one of the most important works ever written. I think we should all read the Bible. I've read it 3 times cover to cover in Spanish, and I've read it several times in English. I think the history, everything about the book, it is just such an important work. And so I think you should read it if you dare. Number 28, The Divine Comedy by Dante. When I bought all my books for my read in 2023, and I had them all stacked up. And the most intimidating book, the most intimidating looking book that I had, more than War and Peace and Anna Karenina, It was the Divine Comedy. I don't know what it was about the book. It just looked really serious. But I enjoyed the read, at least the first two parts. I got kind of bored in Paradiso, but I think it was pretty great. And overall, it's not as intimidating. It's not as difficult to read as I thought it was going to be. Number 27, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. My love, Jane Eyre. Who knew that Captain Mike likes 19th century romance novels? I think this is a big part of it. I listened to a portion of this book on Audible, where it's narrated by Thandie Newton, who I've had a thing for since the Chronicles of Riddick. I read about Charlotte Bronte before I read Jane Eyre, and she sounds really cool. And then I read Jane Eyre, and she also sounds so awesome. So in my mind, I had these three women all like crammed into one woman, and she just sounds amazing. I do recognize, I think the book kind of falls apart towards the end. I'm not a huge fan of the ending of Jane Eyre, but it doesn't really diminish my love for Jane Eyre. 26, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. What a crazy ride this book is. I did enjoy it. I think his use of prose and rhyme and his playing with words and structure, I thought it was so great. I mean, you can read it on different levels, right? It's kind of a funny story, but if you go down, and I don't really analyze necessarily the books that I'm reading, but just do like a surface thought about things that you're reading, it is masterfully done. Number 25, Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. I tried to read this a couple times earlier in my life. I didn't make it through it. I was pleased to make it all the way through this short novella in 2023. Man, I enjoyed the slow burn, the pacing. It is the inspiration for Apocalypse Now. If you like that kind of dark, oppressive, slow story, this is the book for you. Number 24, To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. I am not sure what I thought about this book. Initially, I was like, what the heck? But man, that third part, the third book of the book, man, it just brought it home. I like that ethereal, dreamy quality of the book. What a nice read. And if you think you would like Nicole Kidman whispering in your ear, get the Audible version. Thank me later. Number 23, Middlemarch, A Study of Provincial Life by George Eliot. Okay, I think on this list of books, this is the least interesting book on the list. It's not the worst book on the list, it's just the least interesting. There's nothing there. It's like a bowl of mush. There's no spice, no seasoning, no little bit of anything interesting while you're reading it. You read it, you finish reading it, and you just never think about it again. Number 22, The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. What a story of family and friendship, hardship, deprivation, tragedy, wrath. You know, for some reason, some literary types don't actually like this book. What do I know? I'm just a guy who likes to read, and I think you should read it. Number 21, The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Now, I'm more of a crime and punishment guy. There's something manic and, I don't know, grating about this story that just doesn't 100% do it for me. But I do recognize its greatness. I really am a fan of Dostoevsky. Number 20, The Odyssey by Homer. What a rampage of violence, like casual, almost offhand violence. I liked it. Number 19, Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. Now, I think this is still applicable to today, and that it can elevate a work. It's a story of excess and dissatisfaction. Number 18, The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. I am so glad that this jumped onto the list last year. I just finished reading all 3 of the books. Man, I really enjoyed it. I love this series. The full review will be coming up shortly. Number 17, The Stranger by Albert Camus. This narrowly escapes the disjointedness, the incoherentness, and I'm not even sure if those are words, but of The Trial by Franz Kafka. This is just steps better than that. It's short, give it a go. Number 16, The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner. Now, I think I like this one more than Absalom. Absalom, but that's not saying very much. Number 15, Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. It's his greatest work, I think. I like these psychological thriller style of books. It makes me think and question, what would I do? I mean, in this one specifically, the question is, if you murdered somebody, what would that do to you? How would you react? Could you handle it? Could you carry that weight, that burden? I don't know, but it makes you think. I love stories and books like this, and Dostoevsky, he does it better than almost anyone else. Number 14, War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. What an epic of a book. Man, I really enjoyed it. I did like Anna Karenina more, and I'm glad it moved ahead of War and Peace this year. Number 13, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Now, I prefer Jane Eyre to Jane Austen, but I concede that Pride and Prejudice is a better story. It has great characters, a wonderful setting, and it finishes strong, unlike, I think, Jane Eyre. Number 12, Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes. This book often makes the top 10 list of classic books you don't have to read. Now, this is what I think. I think you should read the first book and just skip the second book. That way, at least when you're out in society and someone mentions Sancho Panza, then you'll get the reference. Number 11, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. This is my mom's favorite book. What a powerful read. I said this on several of these books, but I wept reading this book. Scout, she is awesome. One of the most greatest little girl characters in literature. Give it a read. Into the top 10. Number 10, Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I don't know why it's so high. Honestly, I enjoyed the read. I just feel like it's small and compact. Like there's not a whole lot of characters. The setting is small. It's more dark and dreary. I don't know why it's so high on the list. Should it be on the list? Perhaps. And perhaps it's so small because I think Emily Bronte's life was so small. I'm not saying she didn't have a great life, but I'm just saying I think her environment, it seems if you read about her, it is tight and compact, like Wuthering Heights. Number 9, Moby Dick by Herman Melville. I was reading this, and one of my coworkers went on and on about how this is the stupidest, worst book he's ever read. And I partly agree. I'm just like, it is so bloated. It's as bloated as a dead beached whale that's been rotting for a week. I mean, it's a tragic story of obsession and revenge. And it's even more tragic given that fact that the object of the obsession and the revenge is not even aware that he's the object of that. I think it's a great story. I'm sure there's a lesson to be learned by reading Moby Dick. I'm just upset that I have to read lessons on rope weaving to get to that story. You can make it a third smaller and it would be just as good, if not a greater book. Number 8, Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. I loved this book. I love the pacing. I love the slow deliberateness about the story. I like the paralleling, interweaving stories that are opposites, right? You have Anna descending into madness and tragedy. You have Levin, his story as he finds his happiness. These stories weave in and out of one another. It is a master class of chapter after chapter of interplay. I'm sorry that Tolstoy, did not like his book when it was done. I think it is so well done. And I have coworkers who made it 700 pages into this book and gave up. They said it was just one more wheat field and they just stopped reading it. And I'm sorry they did. I really enjoyed Anna Karenina. Number 7, 1984 by George Orwell. This was the scariest book I read in 2023. It is terrifying in its truthfulness. You absolutely will recognize today's world within these pages. Number 6, Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. Lolita, light of my life, fire of my loins, my sin, my soul. It's not overtly explicit, but intensely erotic. This was a read that I really enjoyed. I've not read a book like this before. And that can be said for quite a few of the books on this list. And I think you could also say that Lolita, it is a tragedy. Number 5, The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. What a crazy read. I really enjoyed this. It is gritty and it's real. Holden Caulfield, his journey of 3 days, it symbolizes the pain of growing up. How many young actors back in the day wanted to play this character? Are you sad that this was never adapted for film? Number 4, 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia to Marquez. Generational magical realism, like Midnight's Children. I'm not sure this is the genre for me. I'm just not quite there. I will say I think Marquez does a better job than Rusty. I appreciated this work more than Midnight's Children, but it's still, I'm not grasping it. There's something about it that's just not doing it for me. And I have friends who think the world of this book. They would put this in their top 3, if not in their favorite book of the all time. For me, it's just not quite there. Maybe I'm just not smart enough to appreciate it. All right, top 3. Number 3, In Search of Lost Time by Marcel Proust. Now, I just read Swan's Way. I didn't read all 7 volumes, and I guess to be fair to him, I should read all 7. But I feel like the first book, I feel like I'm at some museum, some art gallery, and I'm looking at this painting of some master, and I'm not grasping it. I'm like, why is this here? Why is this so great? I'm missing some symbolism, or there's something going on here that I'm not grasping. I feel that way with this book as well. To be fair, I've only read Swan's Way, not all 7. I just don't think I can do it. I don't think I have it in me. Number 2, Ulysses by James Joyce. Think the Holy Virgin. This was number 1 last year and it fell to number 2. And I could not be happier. I don't know why this book is on the list at all. James Joyce said, and I quote, that he put in so many enigmas and puzzles that it will keep the professors busy for centuries arguing over what I meant. And that's the only way of ensuring one's immortality, end quote. Okay, I love to read books. I even like complex, difficult reads. Heart of Darkness, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, a lot of the books on this list, they are difficult reads. I don't shy away from that. But if you're putting in your work, so many puzzles and enigmas, I mean, I don't need that. Why do I want to read something like that? I read every word in Ulysses, and I really enjoyed A Portrait of the Artist as a young man, and it was a lot shorter, and I felt like my journey kind of parallel. There were some very similarities in there, and I appreciated that because of that. There is nothing in Ulysses that I was like, I'm glad I'm reading this. Oh yeah, I get it. No, I don't. This is the only book on this list that I'm like, it just definitely to me should not be on this list. Just, if you get it, if you love this book, feel free to let us know why, but I don't quite get it. And number 1, The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. After languishing 2 years at number 5, it made it to number 1, and I couldn't be happier. I did listen to a portion of this on Audible, where it's narrated very well by Jake Gyllenhaal. I enjoyed the characters, the velvety rich settings, fast cars, loose women, bootleg whiskey. It's one big party until it isn't. The number 1 greatest book of all time for 2025, as determined by an algorithm, The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I think it's great. Thoughts, guys? Thoughts on the list overall? Overall, I think it's a pretty good list. I think, again, it's not very exciting. There are books I think should be on it, but it's determined by the algorithm. Feel free to go and check that out and see how it's done. But what are your thoughts about the list? Are there any books that you're thinking, again, you don't know why it's on the list, or you got some classic or some favorite book of yours that should be on the list? Feel free to let us know in the comments below. Dune by Frank Herbert. It is one of my greatest books of all time. And if I made a list, it would definitely be in the top 3. How about you? Now, as I go through these reviews this year, I will drop a link to them in the comment or in the description below. Feel free to check that out. I haven't done any this year so far, but once I get those done, they'll be down there. Feel free to go look at them. If you've enjoyed this video, guys, if you made it to this point, if you enjoyed it, like it, it's free. Subscribe to see more of my content. Again, I do both whiskey and book reviews. But for now, my friends, you know what to do. I hope you're reading something good and drinking something great, and wear the damn hat. Cheers.